With his day job as an MMA fighter, Pietro Menga, also known as the Italian Stallion aka Rocky, had a more lucrative job as a middleman for an organised crime group, where he was directly involved in sourcing large quantities of coke for customers across the region, all of which he made commission on. Today, Pietro Menga was jailed for 15 years and 5 months. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to sell or transfer prohibited weapons and conspiracy to supply coke. Menga came to the attention of Greater Manchester Police in 2020 after the NCA infiltrated the once encrypted messaging platform service EncroChat. Specialist detectives in the serious organised crime group trawled through thousands of anonymous messages detailing drug deals, firearm sales, and assassination attempts, cross-referencing the sporadic personal details which were discussed in and amongst the criminal business deal. Identifying Menga through messages where he openly spoke about his girlfriend, his knee injuries from fighting the gym at his home, detectives were able to piece together evidence which demonstrated the anonymous user was Menga. Believing his messages were safe, owing to the once encrypted nature, the platform offered service users Menga, using the nameless handle Wireless Shark, was having frank conversations with other criminals, openly discussing the sale and purchase of wholesale amounts of drugs and firearms. From the messages of his encrypted mobile phone, a drugs expert estimated the street sale value of drugs that Menga was involved in were worth between £490,000 and £620,000, and he showed no indication of slowing down or stepping away from the world of crime. Further messages also showed Menga was involved with the organised crime group responsible for a record-breaking firearm trafficking conspiracy, all of whom were convicted early this year for over 200 years. In one conversation, he refers to the Scorpion automatic machine gun as a tasty bit of kit that are always good for a rainy day, stating it comes with ammunition. Police also uncovered several similar conversations of the nature, with Menga attempting to source firearms for other individuals. So let's go through that story before we come back to this. A crime gang responsible for the biggest gun-running plot ever encountered by UK law enforcement operated its main stash house from a plush Ancoats residential development. A property at the Ancoats Marina was rented out to store guns, ammunition, drugs and vast amounts of cash. Adrian Gonzalez, is 33, was the man in charge of the stash house and has now been jailed for 25 years. The gang's other ringleader, Omar Malik, was previously jailed for 38 years, while 4 other conspirators were also handed lengthy prison sentences. A judge at Manchester Crown Court said the gang were responsible for the criminality on an exceptional scale. They were behind the supply of cocaine worth £70 million and sold 48 Scorpion machine pistols to other gangs across the UK and Ireland. The trade in guns and ammunition, Mr. Gonzalez was described by an expert in this field as being amongst the very highest level of criminal firearm trafficking ever encountered by law enforcement in the United Kingdom, the judge John Potter stated. He said that Gonzalez was labelled as a determined and professional criminal. He said, "You proved willing to be active in a trade which on any view causes misery to many within our communities. You knew and appreciated this harm arising from your actions. You were inspired by nothing more than greed and selfishness, in my judgment, to sacrifice the welfare of countless others with a view to make yourself very, very rich indeed." Prosecutors said that the gang peddled drugs across the country through an established network of contacts. The gang dealt in cocaine, and it was high purity and import quality, revealing that those at the top had close links to the original source over in South America. Records kept by the gang revealed that they had supplied about 739 kilos of cocaine between January and May in 2020, so in 5 months, the huge quantity was said to be potentially worth around £70 million on the streets. The gang also traded in firearms, particularly terrifying automatic weapons. The evidence in this case is consistent with the intended use of these firearms in the furtherance of violent criminal disputes, the prosecutor stated. The gang acquired a number of Grand Power pistols for around £147,000 and then sold them on. They also had 48 Scorpion machine guns for the price of between £9,000 to £15,000, and the members of the gang used encrypted EncroChat phones, believing the devices would allow them to commit the crime with impunity. But European law enforcement penetrated the system and UK police were handed damning messages which implicated them. Gonzalez, who was known as Terry fucking Tibbs, on Encrochat took orders from Malik, who was responsible for the stash house. Prosecutor said it had been rented out specifically for the purpose of storing large quantities of drugs, firearms, ammunition and cash. When another gang member was arrested, he helped empty it and move items to another location where police seized 4 machine guns and more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition. Gonzalez was also responsible for brokering drug and gun deals with other criminals and acting as a courier. Prosecutor said the Encrochat messages revealed Gonzalez owned a Scorpion himself, which has never been recovered. He had no previous drug or firearm offences on his record, but was jailed in 2015 for money laundering after being found in possession of over £100,000 in cash. In his defence, Oliver Cook said that Gonzalez has since been diagnosed with a lifelong and life-reducing medical condition. He said the prognosis is not a happy one. He said Gonzalez is physically and mentally a different person than he was previously. So Gonzalez of Manchester pleaded guilty to conspiracy to possess firearm with intent to endanger life and conspiracy to supply cocaine, MDMA and amphetamines. Previously, Omar Malik, who's 33, from Manchester, was found guilty of conspiracy to possess firearm or ammunition with intent to endanger life, conspiracy to supply cocaine, conspiracy to supply MDMA and conspiracy to supply amphetamine. He was sentenced to 38 years in prison. Daniel Gibbons is 39. Of Stockport was found guilty of conspiracy to possess a firearm and ammunition with intent to endanger life, conspiracy to supply cocaine and conspiracy to supply amphetamine. He was found not guilty of conspiracy to supply MDMA and he was sentenced to 28 years. Got Daniel Waters from Stockport. He was again found guilty of conspiracy to possess firearms or ammunition with intent to endanger life and he was jailed for 26.5 years. You got Sean Hogan from Tameside. He's 40 years old, found guilty of conspiracy to supply firearms and ammunition with intent to endanger life and guilty of being concerned in the supply of cocaine and ketamine. He was sentenced to 24 years in prison. Andrew Coney, who's 39, of Alderley Edge, he was found guilty of conspiracy to possess firearms and ammunition with intent to endanger life and conspiracy to supply cocaine. He was sentenced to 27 years in prison. And Connor Sandlin, who's 32, from Rochdale, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to possess firearm or ammunition with intent to endanger life and he was sentenced to 30.5 years in jail. So anyway, back to the Italian stallion. And on the 15th of January 2024, police executed a warrant at Menga's home address and he was arrested. Menga was identified following extensive work which fell under Operation Foam, which was Greater Manchester Police's overarching response to the national takedown of Encrochat. Under Operation Foam, they made over 300 arrests, successfully dismantling several organised crime groups, and they placed some of Manchester's most prolific criminals behind bars for over 1,000 years and prevented industrial volumes of drugs, firearms and thousands of rounds of ammunition from making their way to the streets. Greater Manchester Police said this operation is very much ongoing, with several more warrants and investigations on the horizon as they continue to protect the public by arresting the kingpins and middle-tier criminals who thought they were untouchable. Said the overwhelming evidence from the encrypted services have meant that they have sufficient evidence to prosecute them and demonstrate there is nowhere for criminals to hide in Greater Manchester. Guys, this is a new story coming from the Northwest. It's your boy GT. Keep it locked, keep it real.